The Big 12, they let you know last year that, hey, we got a new media rights deal. Why is that significant? Well, because the Pac-12 hasn't told you that, right? So the Big 12's got a whole lot going on. In fact, the Big 12, over this past week, had their meetings out, I think in Arizona, somewhere like that. Anyway, where it was not important. What was said was very important. Dare I say, the Big 12 is sort of trying to show us what the future of college football broadcasts will look like. Now, there are some things that I'm very old school about. So you may see you may see me twist and turn. If you're listening on podcast, you may see some hesitation or hear some hesitation in the words coming out of my mouth. Don't pay attention to me. I'm old school. Brett Yormark is doing what he should be doing out there, even if I don't happen to like it. So I am very upfront in telling you my objection to some of these things is just purely out of personal interest, and I think I'm in the minority on most of this stuff. So what am I talking about? What is all this? It should have been at the end. It's at the beginning. Well, here's the first thing you need to know. Okay, the Pac-12 and the Big 12, they've sort of been in the same boat for a little while in a few different lanes. So you know the SEC, they print money. The Big 10, they print money. They've got security and media deals and everything else in between. They're good. They're just set. They're monsters. The Pac-12 is, as we speak, still trying to hammer out a media rights deal. The Big 12, to their credit, got ahead of them in line, and they did secure a media rights deal, far less per school per year if you're in the Big 12. But with OU and Texas going out the door, Brett Yormark, the new commissioner there, thought it to be in their best interest to just make sure we've got something. I have it on pretty good word that he also sat in those meetings with those television executives and said, you just wait. The Big 12 you're investing in is not going to be the Big 12 that you've necessarily watched over the last, decade. And it's not just because OU and Texas are leaving. We're going to be innovators because Brett Yormark comes from the world of innovation. He's not a career administrative bureaucrat or anything like that. So they've got very different attitudes as a result, the Big 12 and the Pac-12. Pac-12's got a big, giant question mark over their head right now, and the Big 12, meanwhile, is out there innovating. It's like you're watching OU and Texas walk out the door, which is supposed to be a crowbar to their kneecaps, and instead, however you block a crowbar, they blocked the crowbar and they said, double deuces, goodbye, give us $100 million on your way out, by the way. You can leave early, we don't care. And now we're going to innovate. What innovation are we talking about? Well, this week, the Big 12 had some very important meetings. And I know if you're a Georgia fan or if you're a Virginia Tech fan, you may think, what does this have to do with me? Well, I'll tell you. Otherwise, it wouldn't be leading the show. I can promise you that. You watch college football broadcasts. They've looked pretty similar for a while, right? You've had some advancement, obviously, in terms of just the overall picture quality, but the actual functionality of the broadcast. You've got 2 or 3 people in a booth. You've got our buddies Cole Kubelik and maybe Tom Luganbill down there on the sideline. But by and large, they're formatted the same way. And there are some things in the NFL or the NBA that you get there that you don't get in college. Now, we all know that just because they do it on the pro level does not mean yours truly here cares to see it at the collegiate level. But that's not a broad brush I paint with. There are exceptions to the rule. So anyway, we get to these meetings this past week, and Brett Yormark, the new commissioner out there, he is talking to pretty much everyone, and that's what these meetings are for. And he started talking about the future of the conference. And a couple of very, very interesting notes came out of this. The Houston Chronicle broke a lot of this. SI, Ross Dellinger's been really good on this. Our Uncle Dennis Dodd, had some things this week. Brandon Marcello here at 24/7 Sports. And I'm trying to make sure that I attribute, because what I'm about to read here is a hodgepodge from all of those entities, because they were all out there. So Marcello has been good on this week. Dellinger, Dodd, Houston Chronicle. I don't think I forgot anyone. Good grief if I didn't. Who else was there? So anyway, expanding access. That was the first thing that they focused on. And what they're talking about when they say they're going to expand access, and to be clear, I'm not talking about the playoff or anything like that. I mean Big 12 broadcasts. So when Texas Tech is playing Baylor, what could you get that you didn't get in the past? Now I'm going to tell you what they talked about, and you can decide for yourself whether you like this or not. In-game coaching interviews. Sort of like you see in the NBA. You know, you're going into the second quarter, and boom, all of a sudden, I've got Quinn Snyder being interviewed. And then he being Brett Yormark, talked about pre- and post-game locker room access. I despise that. But like I said at the beginning, ignore what I say. You might as well treat me as an 83-year-old dude sitting on the porch at a Cracker Barrel when it comes to this. I am so old school in my philosophy on this. So this is probably a good thing, even though I don't like it. Also, they are looking into miking players and coaches during the game. That I'm totally indifferent on. You can do that all you want to. I've got reasons why I feel the way I do about the locker room stuff. Anyway, here's a quote from Brett Yormark to 24/7 Sports, courtesy of our Brandon Marcello. It was a long quote, but I boiled it down to this. He said, "We want to bring our fans closer to what we do and give them a peek under the hood. And all the other professional leagues are doing it. Not to say we're antiquated, but it's time for us to be a little bit more progressive, and we would like to take a leadership position in that area." Now, this was coming. As soon as they hired this dude, this was coming because that is the world that he comes from. I will give you my reactions. First, let's start with the whole expanding access thing. I have never been a fan of open locker rooms. I'm not a fan of it in pro sports. Now, I work in an industry where when I say that, I always get shouted down because I work with a bunch of journalists. I don't claim to be one myself, but I work with journalists, and they will bemoan anytime I speak about this. I will get text about this tonight. How could you say we deserve less access? I don't care if you talk to guys at a podium. I don't care if they make 27 of them available to you after a game. My personal feel, perhaps it's the former athlete in me, my personal feel has always been everything else is public now. You have a microscope on you Sunday through Friday. Practices are open, at least to a certain extent, most places. Saturday, you're on the field. They're watching you. There's one place. There's one area left that's a little bit sacred, and once you get through those doors, you can loosen up the tie a little bit. You can unwind just a touch. You can let some things come out of your mouth that you couldn't let come out of your mouth in the public spotlight, and that's the locker room. So the locker room's always been a little bit sacred to me. I'm not a fan of them being open, but I'm also the one who sits here and tells you this is entertainment. It's not the football business. It's the entertainment business. I know. In the interest of avoiding full-on hypocrisy on this show, I know I say that all the time. And so if we've got to open locker rooms, then go for it. I don't think that's something you'll necessarily see tomorrow in the SEC, but the Big 12 has to go about things a different way than the SEC does. Also, there was another thing that Brett Yormark talked about, and him talking about it means they are way down the road in making this happen. They're going to play games in Mexico. They're taking games to Monterrey and Mexico City, and they're going to do it as early as 2025. He talked about it being a very important market. He talked about it being an event capital, and he's right in both of those areas. I'm going to give you another old school warning here. I've spoken about this as recently as like last month on the Late Kick Extra podcast. Someone asked me what I thought about international college football games. And I don't like them, and it's not just because I have personal preference. I don't think it's good business. In this particular vein, I think they're wrong. They're right to try and innovate. I have never thought college football translates well to international markets. What I didn't say there is college football as a product won't appeal to people in international markets. I said taking the game physically to international markets doesn't work, and I'll tell you why. The NFL might as well be played in a television studio with 80,000 seats in there. They could play that anywhere. Outside of Lambeau Field, there are a few places in the NFL in terms of venue. Arrowhead Stadium, where no, you couldn't duplicate that anywhere. But a lot of it is rinse and repeat. Pro stadiums do not have a fraction of the life that college stadiums do. As a result, it doesn't matter if the Jaguars are playing in London or playing in Jacksonville. No one cares. And it's the highest level football competition in the world. That's what appeals. TCU football is not the highest level football competition in the world. And you can take it to Mexico City or Monterrey, or you can put it in Fort Worth, and it's going to be the same product. The difference is what appeals about college football. What's always made college football the spectacle is the game day environment. I have spoken to you about how the NFL action is really what's happening on the field. The college action is what's happening on the field, and that's the beginning. And then it's what's happening around the field. And then it's what even happens outside the venue. That stuff right there is like a college football snow globe. and you shake it up every Saturday, and you get pageantry and tradition and nostalgia and all of what comes with playing a game on campus, and it just swirls around on TV for 4 hours. You take the players and the officials and the game and you put it in Mexico City, you're not taking college football to Mexico City is my point. So I know what the Big 12 is trying to do. I admire the approach. I don't think that in particular is going to yield nearly the kind of dividend that they think it's going to. But again, I do get why they have to do it. They have to try a different approach because there's a gap. There's a really big gap. Greg Sankey doesn't have to worry about this. Okay, the Big 10 doesn't have to worry about this. But the Pac-12 will have to worry about it. The Big 12 does have to worry about it. The ACC kind of has to sort of worry about this. It reminds me a little bit of what we're seeing at Colorado right now with Deion. Deion walks in the door, and he has to do things a totally different way. And you could look at him and say, oh, man, Kirby Smart would never do that. Of course he wouldn't. Kirby's the head coach at Georgia. He's the head coach, Deion's the head coach of Colorado. One of them is the map, and the other's barely on the map. They just went 1-11 last year. Well, in the Big 12, if you are trailing, if you're set to make $32 million per year, and the folks in the Big 10 are set to make $67 million per year, that's a problem. Per team, by the way. Per team, per year. They're making more than twice what you're making. Indiana makes more than twice what any member institution in the Big 12 is making just because they have a different sticker on their helmet. You got to try different things. And the other part to remember, just like we talked about the other day, we're entering this college football expanded playoff era. And one of my big gripes is we're putting this auto conference championship bid in there for half a dozen of the highest ranked conference champions. And you've got the Big 10 and the SEC pulling away from the rest of college football in every discernible metric. And you got OU and Texas leaving the Big 12. And you got USC and Southern Cal or USC and UCLA at least leaving the Pac-12. You got to sit here and ask yourself, is whatever comes out of those conferences as the conference champ really even going to be viewed as viable? Viable enough to be taken in the same breath of seriousness as what the SEC produces or as the Big 10 produces? Now, I saw someone the other day, cannot remember the channel, cannot remember the guy's name, which I hate to do because you deserve attribution and credit, but someone talked about the segment we did the other night where I said, I don't like the auto bid process because I do not like that you could have an extremely watered down conference and because you win it, you're just automatically going to be included in a playoff. Well, this guy goes back and he looks at the past few conference champs and he said, even if conferences are watered down, the champion these conferences have been producing have usually been still ranked pretty high. That's not my point, brother. Yes, because you have to dodge about half a dozen fewer landmines per year. Therefore, you have a smaller number in that L column. That doesn't necessarily mean you've earned anything or deserve to be taken in the same breath of seriousness as someone who's the 4 seed down in the Big 10 or the SEC but played like 5 of the top 13 teams in the country this year. You're going to rack up a few losses. And if you don't have to play that schedule, you will remain a little bit more unscathed. That was the whole argument against UCF back in the day. It wasn't that they're not a good team. It wasn't that they couldn't win, maybe, hypothetically. It was, what challenges did they have to go through to get to that undefeated mark relative to what some of these other schools did? So what kind of challenge collectively is your conference presenting? And that's a whole other conversation, but that's not something immediately that these conference commissioners can control. What they can control is exactly what Brett Yormark is trying to change for the better right now. So in general terms, I salute the attempt. There's some things I like, some things I don't like. Tough. Suck it up would be my advice to myself.